Good day, my nimble netizens. Thank you all for being here. Please make yourselves comfortable. There's donuts in the back. It has been a long time since I started uploading videos on this channel. So long, in fact, that some of you might not have even been born. If you don't know me, I work as a storytelling consultant, which is a real thing, and I talk on the internet about the most common types of story problems that I encounter in my line of work. One of the biggest and most complex problems in storytelling is the issue of fantasy or historical fiction that doesn't feel old. Your ancient peasant characters sound like they know what an iPhone is, and you can't pin down why. So today I'm going to be tackling this problem through one particular lens that I think might be of use. Before diving into this, it's important to remember that humans have not always thought in the way that we do now. There are older ideas, like believing the sun is a literal god, and there are newer ideas like democracy. So, making your fictional world feel old is simple. The characters in it just have to subscribe to older ideas. Unfortunately, simple does not mean easy. If you live in the modern world and are surrounded by modern ideas, it can be very difficult to envision a world where those ideas do not yet exist. But if you want to write characters that feel truly dated, you are going to have to put yourself in some very different shoes. You are going to have to think the way ancient people thought. And this video is about how to do that. On this channel, I often talk about wacky pseudoscientific concepts such as the Enneagram. My goal in talking about these concepts is not to promote the idea that they're true, it's just to show how they can be used. For this video, I have a sparkly new concept to talk about, and that concept is Ken Wilber's integral theory of development. Kenneth Earl Wilber Ill, born January 31st, 1949, is an American theorist and writer on transpersonal psychology and his own integral theory. Uncle Ken hypothesizes that societies evolve from simple to complex. And according to him, that evolution can be broken down into stages, with each stage building on the previous one. If you know what stage your fictional society is in, you will be able to discern which thoughts the characters would realistically have and which thoughts are too ahead of their time. I know that was a mouthful, but it will make more sense once I start explaining the stages. Let's start with level 1. So level 1 on Ken Wilber's scale is pure instinct. So in a level 1 society, characters are not allowed to think. They live in family groups, hunting and foraging, no religion, maybe some extremely minimal language. This is how Homo sapiens lived for like 99% of our existence. But despite that, everything we think of when we imagine stories is not really accessible to archaic level 1 people. Eat, sleep, mate. That is level 1. It is the most basic form of being, and all of the other levels will be built on top of it. Level 2 is magical thinking. So at this level, characters will start to think in terms of associations, rituals, and magic. They will pray to the sky for rain. They will pray to the trees and the animals for a successful hunt. People at this level can be surprisingly chill with it. But they are not chill because they choose to be. It's because they don't see themselves as being fully separate from their environment yet. Their sense of self is still booting up. So of course they're going to go along with the will of nature. They are nature. And by that same token, these societies are highly superstitious of anything that seems unnatural. When a new thing enters their world, they ask, what is this? Do I worship it? Do I kill it? Can I trust it? They are highly superstitious. They have this deep fear of the unknown. Culturally, it's always, yo, do not go past that river. Our people do not venture beyond the Shadowlands. Traditions are not questioned. We follow the old ways, and that is it. That's level 2. Moving on to level 3. Level 3 on Wilber's scale is narcissistic thinking. At this level, societies stop seeing themselves as being part of nature. They now see themselves as being fully separate from nature. Back at level 2, people would pray to the trees so that they dropped fruit. But now at level 3, you just cut the tree down and take the fruit. People at this level view their environments as resources to be exploited, and that includes other people. So level 3 is where you unlock war and conquest. The strongest kill their way to the top and become the leaders. Level 3 societies embody the classic barbarian stereotype. Vikings, raiders, you sack the neighboring city, take their gold, go home to your bed like, today was a good day. These societies are pre-moral, and the things they do are unspeakably horrifying. Nobody would oppose slavery in a world like this. Once again, it's hard to imagine a world that runs on these ideas. But at one point, this was the most advanced type of society that humans could muster. Moving on. Level 4 is ethno-religious thinking. These societies are no longer based on just power. At level 4, a culture unlocks a brand new word, should. They don't know how to use it in a question yet, but they know how things should be, how people should act, how they should dress, who should be in power. At level 3, the king was a bad motherfucker. That's why he was the king. He killed his way to the top. But at level 4, the king is just some autistic boy with a clubfoot. And he's the king because he should be the king, because he was chosen by God. You see how this could be useful. A soldier at level 3 thinks, I'm gonna go fight in the war, get some gold, get some spoils, and if I'm unhappy, I'll mutiny. Right? Because that is the level 3 way of thinking. It's purely just focused on resources and what can I get out of this. But a soldier at level 4 thinks, I am a servant of my king. I will lay down my life for the honor of my homeland, because that's what's right. That's what I should do. Level 4 is where we get the first stable societies, because now people are united under a shared identity, and that identity is often delineated into roles. The key to writing these societies is that nobody has any desire to stand out. You find your role, you conform to your role, that's it. These people are so identified with their own community that they will shun anyone who is not a part of it, sometimes violently. But level 5 is the rational level. When you are able to think rationally and logically, you realize that the prescribed roles and rules of your traditional level 4 culture weren't based in fact. You were just following them because you were told to follow them. But now you start asking questions like, what's actually real? What's the best way we could be doing this? Questions you never thought to ask before because you and everyone around you lived in a bubble of certainty and shared identity. Since you've outgrown the cult phase, a whole new world of possibilities opens up. Science, engineering, progress. At level 5 and beyond, you can no longer write a stagnant society. It's going to grow. Think Legend of Korra, think Piltover. The people within a level 5 society start asking questions like, what do I want? So the concept of a career becomes big here, and then inevitably social competition. And I do distinguish between social competition and the resource competition of level 3. Level 5 societies are easy to envision because we are more or less living in one. Our culture, our institutions, our leaders, it all kind of centers around this individualistic, I'm gonna forge my own path. So at level 5, you have atheist characters, scientists, free thinkers, philosophers. Level 5 is about leaving roles behind and forging one's own path. So this is the birth of truly complex societies, because the idea of an objectively correct path for one's life dissolves. People are no longer bound by tradition. They can be whatever they want. Back in level 4, it was, I'm a stonemason, I serve the king, I will live and die in my role, and I'm fine with that. But now at level 5, it's, I'm gonna start a business. I'm gonna be the best stonemason to ever do it. I'm gonna start a podcast. So at level 5, people unlock this idea of climbing the social ladder. Whether or not this upward social mobility is possible is irrelevant. The point is that people believe it is and behave as if it is. That is the essence of level 5. That is the level 5 zeitgeist. Level 5 is ambition and individualism, but it is also coldness and cynicism. After you abandon tradition, now what? What are we doing all of this for? What's the new center of gravity? Level 6 is utopian thinking. The hypothetical level 6 world is one where all people are healthy and thriving. In this world, ambition is frowned upon. Everyone is acting for the betterment of the species. People finally realize that they're not the main character, that they're just as twisted and messed up as everybody else, and that the best use of their time is probably to contribute to the overall well-being of humanity. In theory, this would be a golden age of unity and prosperity. It would be a true sci-fi utopia.
What year is this? By your calendar, 2364.
You are on the starship USS Enterprise.
American.
No, it's a vessel in the United Federation of Planets, and Earth is a member.
I need to make a phone call as soon as possible.
A phone call?
Yes, I have provided for myself. I have a substantial portfolio. It's critical that I check on it. Let the bank know that I'm alive. Well,
They are the most unusual humans I have ever encountered.
Well, from what I've seen of our guests, there's not much to redeem them. Makes one wonder how our species survived the 21st century.
In practice, not so much. The postmodern green wave, as Wilbur calls it, which begins with a healthy and necessary hunger for liberation, hits a ceiling of its own when it encounters facts it deems problematic. Level 6ers handicap themselves by denying any kind of universal truth or natural order. To many of them, it's more honorable to be another body on a picket line than it is to build real empowering infrastructure. What's worse is that they are completely blind to level 3 narcissists who infiltrate their ranks. Give me what I want nests snugly within everybody is valid and deserving, a phenomenon that Ken Wilber regards as a societal time bomb. While I will applaud level 6 throughout the video for their willingness to work on themselves and critique the power structures around them, like they're awesome in that way, it's important to remember that they're not actually capable of building the utopia they're fighting for. Hierarchy is unfortunately a prerequisite for creation, but I'm getting ahead of myself. This video is sponsored by lsnarrativeconsulting.com, my very own online consulting business. Indeed, I am a big booty entrepreneur. I will now tell you about my services. I offer coaching for storytellers. That could mean helping you find a creative direction for yourself or busting your brainchild out of W-block. I'd say my approach is 10% roasting your ideas, 10% theory, and 80% just being an attentive brainstorming partner. Ultimately, you're the one who plants the creative seed. All I do is rub the tree and whisper sweet nothings into its ear. I'm a bit of an armchair philosopher, if this were the armchair. I've been doing this for almost 2 years now. I've worked with over 300 clients on projects across mediums ranging from amateur to industry. Every time I solve a problem with somebody, my brain logs a new trick and I accumulate them like a snowball rolling down a hill. I am a repository for other people's mistakes. I charge more now and I do less. In the past, I've done full read-throughs and markups of full-length screenplays, but no more. I am just charging flat rates for my time and taking on minimal to no prep. I have eaten so many crayons that I can no longer read. If you hire me, I'll pull up like Party Pete with a bottle of Airport Henny and the crystal I trapped Kubrick in. It's okay, he's playing Minecraft Alpha in there, hi Stan. If I genuinely don't think I can help you with your project, I will let you know. I don't like going in circles either. Just reach out and we can figure out whether or not I am for you. This concludes my self-plug. Visit lsnarrativeconsulting.com to bind me to your will for 1 hour or 90 minutes. So if this is the first you're hearing about this stuff, it might feel very limiting in the same way that the Enneagram feels limiting. And it is. No one society is going to be perfectly encapsulated by these descriptors. They are generalizations. You can either spit on generalizations, or you can use them as a foundation on which to layer your details. I am a big fan of the latter. That is why I made this video. So if you want to use this theory, here's what you do. Take a look at the levels and figure out which level your story world is at. Are you writing an isolated village that's been doing the same thing for hundreds of years, or a society of warriors where power is the only currency, or a cult where people are united under a shared identity or figurehead, or a corporate society full of social climbers, or an egalitarian society where common good thinking is enforced? Or is your society a blend of multiple levels? For instance, Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones is centered at level 4. Power is concentrated in the monarchy. When people go to war, they fight for their king or lord. Plenty of characters in this story are just a loyal servant of insert house, and that is their entire identity, and they're cool with that. That is the level 4 thinking. But a lot of the aristocracy in Game of Thrones are at level 5. They pretend to respect the monarchy, but really they're in it for personal ambition. They are playing selfish games above the level 4 system. And then Daenerys on this scale is operating from level 6. She has big ideas about breaking the wheel and a society without oppression. Regardless of how effective she is in implementing these ideas, she does have more advanced, more modern ideas than her contemporaries. That's probably why she has a whole separate fan base from the rest of the show. She's talking about like justice and equality in a world where most people are perfectly willing to just go and die for some king they've never met. Her story feels so tonally different because she's dealing with ideas that are not even on the other characters' radar. You could just say she's thinking differently, but Ken Wilber would say she's thinking at a higher altitude, a higher level. Now, even if my explanation of levels is clicking with you, and some people are just like, they don't see the use in it, and that's totally fine. But even if you do get it, it might make you feel a bit uneasy. Why? Because you're a good person who values all perspectives, and so when some guy comes out and starts saying, actually, some societies are more advanced than others, that's gonna rub you the wrong way. Ken Wilber's olive branch is this: more complex thinking does not equal better. This is a hierarchy, but it is a hierarchy of complexity, not a hierarchy of value. It's not a hierarchy of effectiveness either. Lower level cultures are still fantastic at thriving in their respective environments. And Ken Wilber acknowledges that even though level 6 break the system thinking is more advanced, it still has massive blind spots. Ken was rejected by academia, he claims, because academia is a level 6 community, and level 6ers do not like hierarchy. They have a visceral gag reflex to the implication that some people are more advanced than others. That doesn't sit well with them, because we're all equal, right? Fight the system, right? So who are you to say that someone's religion is based off of low-level magical thinking? That is so cruel. How could you put them in that box? And Uncle Ken said, yes, I agree, 100% emoji, but this is one hierarchy you should pay attention to. Case in point, if my worldview includes and validates yours, but your worldview does not include and validate mine, who has the bigger umbrella? And they said, get out, get out, get out, and Ken Wilber has been on the fringes of academia ever since. But even people who believe in the substance of Ken Wilber's theory still have their hangups. As I alluded to, Wilber's system has levels beyond 6. And the higher up you go, the more spiritual and theoretical these levels start to get. These higher levels, Wilber claims, hold the keys to basically solving all of humanity's problems. But how exactly that's going to take place is not clear. Level 7 in Ken's theory is, shocker, the level where you start to see the levels, which is very convenient for him. His worldview explicitly pedestalizes itself, which is another red flag for people who are wary of hierarchies. Integral theory claims to have discovered an objective human nature, and that's a big claim to make for a theory that's never been put into practice. But regardless of where you stand on integral theory, it has massive storytelling implications, and for that reason alone, it is invited to this particular cookout. Here's the thing. I'm normally very good at explaining ideas, but here's the thing. Ken Wilber's theory is not an idea. It is a sorting system for ideas. And you only begin to realize how freakishly efficient it is once you start using it to sort ideas. In other words, the best way to explain this theory is to just start applying it to mountains and mountains of context. And there's no shortcut for that. You just gotta give the sorting system things to sort. So I'm gonna start talking about media. I spent the first chunk of this video explaining what the levels look like from a bird's eye view in the context of world building. A world at level 3 will be centered around resource acquisition and brute force. A world at level 5 will revolve around ambition and individualism. But just building a world and giving the characters level appropriate psychology is not a story. To immerse the audience in a lower level story, you actually have to write that story from the perspective of someone at that level. We might look at a medieval crusader knight going to war to spread his religion for the Pope as very brutal and primitive, but that's not how the medieval crusader knight sees it. In his mind, he thinks that he's serving the light. He thinks that he's on the one true path. And so if he wrote a story about himself that depicted himself the way he sees himself, the hero would be a noble warrior. He would depict his enemies as savages. And when he slayed his enemies, the music would swell up all triumphant because that's how he sees his life. So the next step in understanding the levels is understanding how each level sees itself. That way you can immerse your audience in an ancient POV. In other words, it's no longer just the world that feels old, it's the story itself. Each level comes with its own bundle of themes and archetypes that can be reliably predicted. And if you know which level your POV is, you'll know which themes and archetypes belong in your story. So I'm going to give a brief overview of what the world feels like when you are at each of these levels, starting with level 1. Remember, this is archaic, instinctual, no thoughts, only survival. So your characters, if you even want to call them that, are limited to base functions. Eat, sleep, mate. Those are the narrative ingredients you're working with. There are no religions, no philosophies, no individual identities, no self-awareness. Imagine watching a nature documentary, but instead of animals, it's prehistoric humans running around and sleeping in caves and hunting together. Like, oh no, is he gonna get the gazelle? Damn it, maybe tomorrow. That's the most complex story you can tell at level 1. Okay, level 2. It is very hard to imagine how level 2 people think. The most tried and true explanation goes like this. If you were to walk outside and you saw birds flying around you, you would be like, oh, there's that bird and that bird and that bird and that bird and that bird. But a level 2 person would just see them all collectively as bird. The birds are one entity, and that entity becomes a sort of god in their minds. They similarly personify the river, the trees, the bears. They've just gained the concept of a self, so they mistakenly perceive selves in the world around them. They sort of think, since I am an intelligent entity, everything else must be an intelligent entity. So I'm gonna pray to this tree so that it drops fruit. And that makes sense to them. Now you might look at that and think, oh, so wise, so enlightened, so nature. And you might look at that like, what a dumbass, why is he praying to that tree? But it doesn't matter how you see these behaviors. Remember, we're talking about POV, so it matters how the level 2 thinker sees them. In the mind of a level 2 thinker, the world really does consist of what you could call spirits. Friendly spirits who give us abundance, and evil spirits who are to be feared. Magic is alive and well in the mind of a level 2 thinker. And so to write from their POV, you have to respect that. The themes of any story are revealed through what behaviors the story rewards. This is unavoidable. If your characters make choices and those choices are rewarded, you as a writer are saying those were the correct choices. You can't escape this. Any story where something happens is endorsing some kind of value system. Level 2 thinkers believe that the right way to live is to give tribute to the gods and follow the old ways. And so if you want to write a level 2 story, those behaviors have to be rewarded. The level 2 story must endorse those behaviors. It must affirm their worldview. If the characters pray to the spirits, their prayers must be answered. The story must treat the level 2 gods as real without undermining them or invalidating them. The most obvious example I can think of for this is James Cameron's Avatar. The old gods, the spirits, come to save the day at the end. This is an affirmation of the level 2 psychology. Yes, there is exposition about how Awa is actually a biological intelligence and blah, 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 but if you cut that out, ultimately, this is a story about how the old gods are real. Avatar is fundamentally a level 2 story because it reinforces and validates the level 2 worldview. Moving on to level 3. If you'll recall, level 3 is where people no longer identify with nature. They see themselves as being autonomous. At level 1, you just are nature. Level 2, it's a 1 foot in, 1 foot out kind of thing. But level 3 is when you fully separate from nature. You are fully individuated. And now that you have this outside perspective, you're looking in on nature, you can start to see how power actually works in the world. Turns out, if you want something, you can manipulate your surroundings to get it. So level 3 is just a bunch of little narcissists running around trying to get things from each other. There's no moral code yet. It's just, I want. So what does a culture built on I want look like? Actually, it's more interesting than you might think. A level 3 culture can't conceive of anything beyond resources and their immediate emotions. They don't have a true rule of law yet. Level 3 is pre-moral. So who are the heroes in a story that's pre-moral? Well, everybody's going to idolize the badass warrior dude who gets what he wants. Achilles was not seen as a hero because he was a godly man who did the right thing. He was seen as a hero because he was good at killing. He was good at getting what he wanted, and at level 3, where men don't yet have a value system to measure themselves against, that's the dream. A person like Achilles is your role model. 3 World is so deeply amoral that even Troy 2003 had to inject some modern values to help it go down a little smoother with modern audiences. Paris and Helen weren't actually in love. He just kidnapped her. He just said, I want that one, and he took her, and it started a war. And you know this is a level 3 story because the story actually rewards him for that. Like, he gets off scot-free. Greatness, as defined by level 3 culture, is competency at acquiring resources. So what gets rewarded in a level 3 story? It's cunning, it's bravery, it's cleverness, it's the ability to get what you want. Good and evil are not concepts that these people possess. They worship gods of power. Now again, pre-moral does not mean pre-emotional. I mentioned emotions. Love and kinship and revenge, all in bounds. But the idea of doing something for the greater good should not exist in a level 3 story. That is too advanced for that level. Another thing worth noting, which is kind of just interesting to me, at level 3, death is front and center. Level 4, death gets decentered, right? Because now we have God and we have a true purpose and we're going to the promised land. But at level 3, people are acutely aware of death. Their myths revolve around facing death and going out like a badass. Even if they have some kind of heaven, it is a warrior's heaven and you must pay the entrance fee in blood. So all of those themes and ideas and archetypes would be the DNA of a level 3 story, such as the Iliad. Okay, going into the level 4 POV. Level 4 is where people start to divide the world up into good and evil. It is the birth of morals. You don't have moral laws at levels 1 through 3. Level 4 stories are quite simply about choosing the good side as opposed to the bad side. And to qualify as a level 4 story, the good side has to be rewarded in the end and the bad side has to be punished. Star Wars. Literal light side versus dark side, light side wins. Lord of the Rings, same deal, epic clash of good and evil. If you are at level 4, you think in terms of heroes and villains. To be a hero means to serve the good side, to be a villain means to serve the bad side. Simple as that. The modern superhero mythos is built on this idea. Cackling evil villains, noble heroes who stop them. And these archetypes are never deconstructed in a level 4 story. You never have like self-aware, oh, are the good guys the good guys? Are the bad guys actually good? It's just good side, bad side. Moving on to level 5. Level 5 is where you begin to outgrow the myth. You begin to carve out an identity for yourself beyond just what your role is. Again, this is our modern world. Ambition, cynicism, moral grayness, personal goals, rationality, these structures and hierarchies that were treated as gospel back at level 4 are now just sort of a neutral obstacle to be navigated. If you're not sure which level your story is at, again, look at who the plot rewards. If the plot rewards boldness and natural ability, that's level 3. If it rewards faith and allegiance, that's level 4. And if it rewards rational thinking and self-optimization, that is level 5. But again, we're looking at how does the world look from that level's POV. And in the case of level 5, there is kind of this question of to what end? Like, we outgrew God, now what? The intellect can only serve, and now it has no master but the mirror. So modern movies can feel kind of soulless compared to the classic good-evil myths, because at the end of the day, there's no thesis. Level 5 really doesn't believe in anything. A lot of level 5 stories are just about defending the status quo from one of those glorious purpose nut jobs down at level 4. I think the perfect example of a movie that exemplifies this level 5 problem is Christopher Nolan's Tenet. Stories that are 100% at level 5 can sort of eat their own tails, because without a value system, where does this go? Who do we root for? It's just guys in suits. And this cool faction wants this, and that cool faction wants that, and everybody's a scientist or a spy, and it can get kind of exhausting because these stories lack heart. They are godless, directionless coolness. Game of Thrones is a level 5 story, but it only works because the level 5s get to play their rational games against the backdrop of the level 4 monarchy, and even then, jury's out. I mean, part of the reason I think George is not able to tie this story up into a perfect little knot is because he abandoned the myth. He abandoned the idea of the sincere myth that Lord of the Rings and Star Wars are built on. And after you abandon that myth, where do you go? So level 5 stories are fun to talk about, but they often feel like they are missing something. And that something, should you choose to take the next step, is what level 6 provides. Level 6 is about therapy. Not literally, but it's about unpacking motivations and why characters are the way they are, what led to them being this way. It's not hero versus evil, it's not pseudo-hero versus other pseudo-heroes. At level 6, it's about you versus your own conception of reality, your own limiting beliefs, your own trauma. Characters having deep internal flaws and wounds is what level 6 is all about. At level 5, the systems and institutions are kind of just treated as backdrop, but level 6 is about deconstructing the myths, the culture, the systems, the institutions. Are the Jedi really good? Are the orcs really evil? No and no, it would seem.
This isn't about good or bad. This is about power and who is allowed to use it.
Level 6 gets off on deconstructing everything, and indeed this mentality has polluted classic level 4 good and evil myths. But level 6 is fine when it stays in its lane.
Oppression breeds rebellion.
The world is not what you think. You need to break out. You need to fight this lie. That is the core theme we find at level 6. And so in a level 6 story, the bad guys are the people in power. They are the ones who maintain the lie. And the heroes are the ones who see the truth. But you don't have to write a galaxy-wide epic to capture the themes of this level. Level 6 is simply about questioning your reality, deconstructing the stories you tell yourself, revealing the true agendas at play. Level 7 is the last one I'll talk about because this is where it starts to get really trippy and potentially not useful. I have not talked about level 7 in this video yet. I had to set the table, but now we're going to do it. Level 6 is about becoming subjectively aware of the truth. I was living a lie, but now I know. But level 7 is about multiple subjective awarenesses that are not immediately aware of each other, but nonetheless contribute to a bigger picture. Basically, Westworld Season 1. Westworld is a show about advanced androids who unknowingly live in a theme park. When one of the androids dies, they are brought back to life with none of their old memories intact. Spoilers, the protagonist, Dolores, is an android, and she dies in the very first episode. And when she wakes up, she doesn't have memories anymore. But it doesn't matter to the story that she loses those memories, that she loses that initial instance of consciousness. All of the Westworld robots die and start over again and again with no memories, but they change in ways that they are not consciously aware of and never become consciously aware of. The story does not rely on linear subjective consciousness. Level 7 is a tapestry of lives, of perspectives that do not fully know about each other. So anything about a past life, a parallel world, a dream world, or multiple personalities, that's what I'm talking about. I saw the TV glow as a very lofty, abstract way to do this. A more concrete example is the substance. This lady's personality basically splits in two, and the two selves become two completely different characters with different identities. Level 7 plays with the very fabric of subjectivity. Your current awareness is a single brick in a structure that you cannot perceive. Level 6 has this absolutist idea towards truth. This is my truth is the highest truth, I know the truth now. And level 7 goes, okay, buddy, keep telling yourself that. It is a recognition of a higher order beyond the subjective experience. Very few stories attempt this because it's not relatable in any obvious way. The viewer can identify with the bricks, but not the structure. But if it's done right, level 7 can explore themes of repression and state-dependent memory and splitting, which are relatable to a lot of people and might scratch their brains in a way that is hard to quantify. An argument could even be made that any anthology is, in a sense, doing this, arranging non sequitur entries around a common brand which is implied by its very existence to mean something. Otherwise, why put them in a group, right? Why attach the same overarching label to them if they are not facets of an associative whole? It would be like if they called a random movie American Psycho 2. Level 7, or Teal, has a certain spirituality to it, if you want to call it that. The ultimate truth that's beyond our awareness, type shit, type beat. According to Ken Wilber, as I said earlier, level 7 is the level where you start to see the levels. When you start to see society as one big organism, the health of which transcends the health of any one individual member. So if you're still watching after that last bit, congratulations. We are now entering real schizo hours. For the entirety of this video, I have been linking the levels to world building and time periods. I do this because using that historical or pseudo-historical context is the best way to explain levels. But levels aren't actually about world building and time periods. Levels are about you. You've changed. At some point in your life, whether it was 2 years ago or 2 decades ago, you had a drastically different set of priorities. But then you got older and stuff happened, you gained knowledge and life experience, and now your priorities are different. And you look back on that old self and you cringe. Like, what was I doing back then? It feels like a different person. And yet, in the moment, that was just your reality. You felt sane then in the same way you feel sane now. But despite all of this, most of us take our personal growth for granted. We look back on our lives and we say, I used to think X and now I think Y, and now I know the truth. But Wilber hypothesizes that the levels we see in civilization are the same levels that we individually pass through on our way to maturity. You were born at level 1, basically an animal that was completely non-individuated, right? Like an infant doesn't see itself as being separate from its mother. It is non-individuated. It is literally part of nature. And then you started to climb up the levels. When you were a very young child, you exhibited level 2 thinking. You know how little kids will get really into a brand or character, like Mickey Mouse, and they'll go through that age where they want Mickey Mouse clothes and Mickey Mouse shoes and Mickey Mouse plates, anything with Mickey Mouse on it. They think this toy is Mickey and this backpack is Mickey and this birthday cake is Mickey. And Mickey sort of becomes this benevolent, abstract entity to them. And this phenomenon occurs because they are intelligent enough to think abstractly, meaning they're intelligent enough to identify commonalities between individual things and link those commonalities up to an abstraction, like Mickey Mouse, right? They can recognize the logo and they understand that all corresponds up to a concept, which is Mickey Mouse. But even though they are intelligent enough to think abstractly, they are not intelligent enough to distinguish their abstractions from reality. At one point in your life, you thought like this. And then the people around you, your parents, your culture, filled your head with more information and you realized, oh, Mickey isn't real. He's a made-up character. And you learned how to read and you picked up more nuanced ways of thinking. But imagine if that was the most sophisticated way of thinking in your culture. You wouldn't have outgrown level 2. You would be a full-grown, sexually mature adult who believes in a collective fish spirit that is somehow every fish. And that would just make sense to you. You know, obviously Mickey Mouse and the brands kids like, that's a very modern concept, but it is an ancient way of thinking we are seeing them apply to this modern stuff because they have an ancient brain, which is to say they have an underdeveloped brain. All of that is to say it is the psychology itself that counts, not the context it gets applied to. A level 3 story does not have to take place in the Bronze Age. The Sandlot, for instance, is about a bunch of 1960s kids who accidentally hit a baseball over the neighbor's fence and have to outwit his dog to go and recover it. And The Sandlot is a level 3 or red meme story. It's about a bunch of kids who want a thing. And who is the hero of The Sandlot? Benny. Is Benny the hero because he's the goodest, because he's the most aligned with righteousness? Not really. He's the hero because he's the most competent. He's the coolest kid on the block. He accomplishes feats of bravery and athleticism to get the ball back. Benny is a hero in the vein of Achilles. That's why the other kids worship him. He doesn't have a birthright or a higher purpose like Luke Skywalker or Aragorn. He's just the coolest kid on the block. Even his whole dream subplot is about getting remembered beyond death by being a legend, by being so competent, which ties into what I was saying earlier about Bronze Age pre-modern thinking and the way that they center death and legacy in the face of death, which is pretty cool. Level 3 is pre-moral. They idolize feats of strength and resource acquisition. It's just, oh my God, that guy is so cool. That guy is so competent and good at getting what he wants. I want to be like that guy. And it doesn't go beyond that. That is the ceiling. That is the limit of their cognition. Lord of the Flies is textbook level 3. Basically, any mafia movie is level 3. Just amoral people being horrible to each other with no higher calling beyond, this is the life I want to live, so I'm going to do it. All of those shitty 2000s comedies about dude bros who are just trying to get laid, level 3. Pre-moral, resources, pleasure, that's their world and they can't see beyond it. When you look at Bronze Age myths, like the Iliad and the Odyssey, is it not oddly reminiscent of when you were 13 and that one kid on the soccer team scored that really cool goal? And even though he left the team a while ago, everybody is still talking about it because he's so cool and he did that really cool thing. It's the same vibe. It's like idolizing feats of competence. I remember when I was at level 3, I went to Catholic school, and at Catholic school, we all had to wear these uniforms. And the one piece of our outfit that we could customize or that we could use to show anything beyond our conformist Catholic boy identity was shoes, right? There was no code on shoes. So shoes became this status indicator. They weren't an aesthetic choice, right? But the kid with the most expensive looking shoes had a sort of status. And so these kids would buy these ridiculous, like highlighter looking ass shoes, just like the ugliest shit ever. And it was like, I forget, like the KD shoes or the LeBrons, but they were disgusting, right? And they'd have the Nike, the stripe thing up the back, the sock, you know what I'm talking about. And this culture was so extreme because it was the only way that these kids could differentiate themselves. And I was telling stories when I was at this age, at level 3 too. I had Lego stop motion sagas, and I loved these characters. They felt incredibly real to me. In retrospect, all of my characters were just guys who fought each other. They had no personality beyond their appearance and their abilities. I created them in that way because that was my cognitive level at the time. So imagine an entire culture where that is the smartest that you get. Imagine what that society would look like. It would just be a bunch of dude bros killing and pillaging and raping and plundering in hopes of going down in history as a legend. And they would construct entire religions and philosophies around these priorities. The irony of level 3 stories is that they are some of the hardest to write. You have a limited palette of ideas to choose from. There's no hero's journey or enneagram to save you. I've encountered some really cool level 3 stories with very complex plots. Typically, it's just an exceptionally well done guy wants things story. And that's perfectly cool. Again, this is a hierarchy of complexity, is not a hierarchy of value. Now, if you're not sure where your story sits, you look at two things, the antagonists and the mentors. If your story is centered at level 4, the villains will usually be one level below at level 3. That is why the classic fantasy Dark Lord is solely concerned with resources and pleasure, and I just want what I want because I want it, and he's evil for the sake of being evil. Because that is how you perceive the level below you if you're at level 4. Right? You perceive them as just this dark, lawless thing that you need to civilize. This pure evil antagonist is a dead giveaway that you're dealing with a level 4 story, because that's how they view the people beneath them and anybody else who isn't a part of their shared identity. And who are the mentors in level 4 stories? They're the masters, the competent tacticians who, have the tactical skills to help you advance and become the best version of the good that you can be, aka the level 5s. But if we go down a level to stories centered at level 3, who are the mentors? Sure enough, it's the responsible community member adults who know the right way to live, as opposed to the rambunctious, impulsive protagonists. And in a story centered at level 3, the threat will often be portrayed as magical, because that's one level down, right? So in Aguirre, the Wrath of God, the native Peruvians are never seen. They simply rained arrows down on the Spaniards, just this unstoppable force of nature, a mist that cannot be grasped. In The Sandlot, the beast is shrouded in absurd tall tales and given a mystical aura, because if you're a resource-minded, pre-moral, pre-modern human, the scariest thing to you is a magic that you cannot hit with your sword. It is the nightmare of your childhood come to drag you back under the bed. HBO's Chernobyl has big level 2 vibes. If you take away the suits and the bureaucracy, what you're left with is a story about terrified humans poking a glowy, scary thing with a stick. So levels are not about time periods or ancient versus modern, they are simply ways of thinking. Why is it important to know how your characters think? Well, obviously, the way you think influences your choices, but the levels can trickle all the way down to dialogue and word choice. King Viserys from House of the Dragon spends the pilot episode obsessing over his lack of a male heir. And this is a very ancient thing to get worked up over. In our modern world, it's okay, so what? I didn't have a boy. It's not the end of the world. Maybe I wanted a boy, but I had a girl, whatever. But he's pressed about this. Would a modern person be throwing a fit over having a male heir? Probably not, but he is not a modern person. He's deeply embedded in a level 4 society, and this is important. The dialogue and the presentation of him dignifies his lower level concerns, because that is his world. That is all he knows. Imagine you have a trio of characters on a dangerous quest, and one gets left behind. If you're writing a level 3 story, the character's friend would say, I want to go back and rescue him. He's my friend. But in a level 4 story, it would be, we should go back and rescue him. It's what's right. And that seems like a very, very small thing. But imagine that distinction for an entire movie or an entire show, right? Those tiny differences in dialogue build up and they accumulate into what you could call a vibe. Just kind of this imperceptible feeling of the psychology of the characters, kind of just in this big psychological soup that you as an audience member can feel radiating off of the thing. It's why the early Game of Thrones seasons feel old. The world is old. And then they gave up on that. It's why Troy feels old. It's why the Northman, feels like you're really there in those old times. It's because the characters are not thinking in the way that we think. They're thinking in ancient, lower level ways. There is another use for Ken Wilber's theory. Since it literally maps out stages of growth, you could use it for character arcs. You could have a character climb up the levels. Self-centered murderer discovers morality. That's the move from 3 to 4. Multicultural hippie finally admits that some form of order and hierarchy are necessary. That's the move from 6 to 7. Every possible character arc, in theory, exists along this continuum. The one rule being you can't skip levels. If your characters advance too quickly, immersion will be lost. I want you to just think about our culture. Think about every Reddit story you've ever read, and tell me which of these sounds more plausible. Number 1, frat bro who doesn't care about anything but partying suddenly finds Jesus and gets responsible. Or number 2, frat bro who doesn't care about anything but partying suddenly realizes that upward social mobility is a lie and we have to deconstruct the systems that hold us down. I've seen the first one before, but the second one feels like a stretch. You can't deconstruct your sense of self if you haven't built it up in the first place. There is an unavoidable logic to these things. Even if you don't agree with the stages as Wilber puts them, you can't deny that some ideas necessarily predate others. You cannot have the concept of moral grayness until you first learn what morals are. You have to build the thing to break it or to modify it. Small children need to learn how resources actually work. Amoral I want people need to learn the rules and become responsible. Responsible rule followers need to escape the rules by becoming rational individuals. Rational individuals need to realize that their rationality was probably just to cope for how miserable and sick they are inside. And you can take any section out of this ladder and make it a character arc. When I was outlining this video, I was like, damn, I wish I could find a story that shows a character developing through all of the levels. If only there were a story that depicted a brain maturing in real time and invoked familiar human archetypes to such a degree that it transcended its hopelessly niche genre roots and proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that you can, in fact, write a deeply compelling, universally relevant epic about a monkey's speedrunning enlightenment. If you don't know, Planet of the Apes is a franchise that chronicles how humanity, that's us, came to be wiped out and replaced by intelligent primates. The most recent film in the franchise is called Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. It takes place hundreds of years after the fall of humanity in the ape-dominated world. Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes is all about the interactions between societies that are at different levels of thinking. It explores the confusion and brutality that occurs when these societies clash. But before they could form societies and do war, the apes in this universe were just apes. According to Ken Wilber's scale, these apes sat at level 1. That is to say, they were governed by archaic instinctive survival urges. Just for redundancy, there are no ideas at this stage. It is base instincts. So, food, safety, the realm of ideas does not get introduced until level 2. The 2011 film Rise of the Planet of the Apes introduces an ape character named Caesar. Caesar has a genetic difference that allows him to accelerate in his intelligence at a really rapid rate. Caesar was born with a more powerful mind than other apes, which means he can begin to understand ideas, leaving the primordial level 1 state and entering level 2. Remember, level 2 is where a being begins to understand symbols and associations. Symbols and associations could be called the earliest rumblings of consciousness. They are proof that a creature can make abstract connections between two unrelated things in order to improve how they gather resources and manage the natural world around them. But through his interactions with humans and other apes, Caesar learns how power actually works. The strong oppress the weak. So Caesar becomes a level 3 leader. His boldness and his cleverness allow him to rise to a position of power. He uses that power to assert his will and take what he wants. Remember, level 3 is a practical level. It's not about morality. It is about autonomy, dominance, and managing one's environment to procure resources. Practical intelligence develops at this stage. Cunning, cleverness. Caesar uses his cleverness to outwit the humans. But when we catch up with Caesar in the next film, Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, he isn't just a clever warlord anymore. He has a philosophy. Apes together strong. Ape not kill ape. He holds himself and his fellow apes to a moral code. Caesar has moved up to level 4. Level 4 is the dawn of morality. People at this level follow rules. Not the rules of nature. We figured those out a while ago. These new rules exist in the mind. They are religious rules. and they bind people together under a shared identity, a common sense of self. Back in the lower levels, it was just about survival and getting our needs met. But now that we've figured out that stuff, we need something higher to guide us. So we follow Caesar's rules. But there is a problem. Caesar's friend and lieutenant Koba is still stuck in level 3 thinking. Koba has so much trauma from before the ape revolution that he really can't wrap his head around this whole rules thing. He's still in survival mode. Koba guns Caesar down and takes control. The philosophy that Caesar thought was the answer made him blind to the reality of Koba. So Caesar's Arc and Dawn is about moving past his level 4 thinking. He defeats Koba by loosening up on his religious law and becoming a rational leader who understands that there's a time for principles and a time for decisive action. Caesar has moved past the cult-like absolutist thinking of level 4 and entered level 5. War for the Planet of the Apes is Caesar's third and final chapter, and it's about his move from level 5 to level 6, if you want to weigh it against this scale. Obviously, they didn't write it with the scale in mind, but like the process of moving to level 6 involves confronting oneself, confronting one's self-concept. You are realizing how ugly your soul is, and you want to be better. War for the Planet of the Apes is about Caesar overcoming his rage and resentment around the past and becoming the ape messiah his people need. He does all of that, and then he dies. And that's where things get really interesting. At the end of his life, Caesar truly embodied wellness and compassion, and he preached wellness and compassion to the masses. But if the masses aren't at that level, they will co-opt the enlightened leader's language and symbols, drag them down to their own level, and use them for their own ends. They don't know they're doing this. They just have a cognitive ceiling. For them, it's, Caesar taught us the one true way, and we need to spread his teaching by any means necessary, because that's, the right thing to do. And so there is now this cult of Caesar who have taken his enlightened ideas and turned them into hollow symbols that are basically just a guise for colonization and persecution of other ape colonies. Level 3 empires will just kill you, Viking style, but level 4 empires are serving a higher cause. They want to re-educate you because it's not just about power and resources anymore. It's about sharing that idea. It's about bringing people into this one true way that we all know is so true. And who is behind all this? Enter Proximus Caesar, the Ape King. Proximus uses the words of Caesar to give his people direction and purpose. Proximus doesn't identify with Caesarism to the degree that his followers do. Proximus is a level 5 thinker. Level 5 is where you realize, oh wait, I could be doing this more effectively. I could be doing this in a way that aligns with what I want, as opposed to just what I've been told to believe and how I've been told to act. I can carve out an identity other than the one that was given to me. Proximus pretends to believe in the absolute truth of his culture because his people are simple and that's what they need, but secretly he studies human history and he draws from other cultures to optimize his own. Proximus hasn't gotten to level 6 where you actually develop empathy for strangers, but he's not a cultist either, he's a social strategist. If you talk to a level 4 thinker and say, hey, this other culture is doing something better than us and we should learn from them, the level 4 will go, no, because we know the one true way, but the level 5 will go better. I want to be better. Tell me more. But yeah, I love this movie both as a thought experiment and as a story. I think it just nails the levels of development in a way that I haven't seen anywhere else. And this franchise as a whole is a beautiful exploration of the evolution of consciousness. So there you have it. You can use Ken Wilber's levels to make your fictional world feel as ancient or as modern as you desire. You can tell a story from the POV of one of the levels, engaging older, more primordial themes inside or outside of their traditional historical context. And you can use the levels to chart a course for character growth. But there is one more fun trick you can do with this theory. Ken Wilber's whole philosophy is that all of the levels are valid and necessary. Different levels come in handy at different times. For instance, if you're in a street fight, you need to engage the level 3 part of your brain. If you're faced with a complex technical problem, level 5 is your boy. If you're trying to understand someone else's perspective, you fire up level 6. A truly integrative mindset is one that incorporates all levels. So what does that mean in storytelling terms? It means a story that engages every level within you. A story that isn't just a lizard brain trip or a spooky mystical experience or a vicarious wish fulfillment fantasy or a vindicating take on morals or a plane passing by. still passing by, or a testament to exceptionalism or a conscious critique, but all of those things at once, and having them not contradict each other. And so everything I've said in this video boils down to one simple checklist, a checklist for creating a perfect story. Here it goes. To engage level 1, your story needs life and death stakes. To engage level 2, iconic imagery and symbols. Level 3, conflict over tangible resources. Level 4, a clear dichotomy of good and evil. Level 5, exceptional people who stand out from the crowd. And level 6, self-awareness and deconstruction. So let's look at some iconic stories to see if they check these boxes. Lord of the Rings, life and death stakes up the wazoo, iconic ring, iconic swords, wizard, balrog, giant eyeball, the tangible journey from point A to point B to drop a tangible object into a tangible volcano, a villain who is unambiguously sadistic and cruel, heroes who are unambiguously good and honorable, characters falling into evil ways and repenting from them, exceptional fighters and magic wielders who do exceptional things, Éowyn going against gender roles, Theoden waking up from a trance, the people of Middle-earth overcoming their limiting beliefs around death, and the entire race of men standing in solidarity against the true evil that's been pulling the strings all along. How about the Matrix? Well, it's very easy to die in this world. See? Yoink, pills, leather, sunglasses, a combination of symbols found nowhere else. The characters have to physically rescue Morpheus. They have to physically get to the phone booth to escape. Evil machines rule the earth. Neo trains to become exceptional. He is exceptional. And of course, the entire reality Neo thought he lived in was a lie. Star Wars. Empire kills Luke's family in the first act. Lightsabers, instantly recognizable ship designs. The characters have to physically save the princess, who has to physically get the Death Star plans to the physical rebellion so that they can literally tangibly blow up the enemy. Light side versus dark side binary. Obi-Wan Kenobi, the experienced Jedi Knight who trains the hero. Training is a very level 5 concept. Like Rocky is such a level 5 epic where it's just like optimize, train, better. And Luke waking up to the evils of the Empire, which he's initially neutral on, and choosing rebellion. The entire concept of the rebellion in general, subverting systems, yada yada, level 6. How about Raiders of the Lost Ark? Killers and threats everywhere. Indy's whip, his iconic hat silhouette, Ark of the Covenant, Schwabstica. Most of this movie is about finding the physical location of the Ark. Literal actual God is on the side of the heroes. Indy is the only man for the job because he's so skilled. There isn't a level 6 what you thought was good was actually bad all along, or vice versa subversion in this movie, but it definitely hits the first 5. Deadpool and Wolverine, fate of the multiverse at stake, iconic costumes and branding. The characters have to physically drive across the void, physically stop the time river. A villain who is evil just for the hell of it. Explicit in-universe usage of the term superhero, exceptional fighters, exceptional technology, Cassandra's self-awareness, the characters learning personal lessons that apply just to them in their own subjective worlds. Avatar, the Na'vi's lives are at stake, iconic blue people and animal designs, factions going to war against each other, cartoonishly evil villains, the main character being special and exceptional, systems being overthrown. Avatar has a level 2 center of gravity, but it engages the other levels as well. Same with Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings is fundamentally a level 4 myth, but it's more than that. It engages all levels of the self. So if you want your story to appeal to the widest breadth of people, you should follow that checklist. That is what it means to have a leveled approach to storytelling. I definitely could have made a version of this video that was more storytelling oriented, like where I make everything about characters and I don't try to connect it to the real world. But honestly, I didn't want to. I am among the people who find this theory very interesting. Like, I think we should try training AI on this because it very well could be a ladder to a more advanced form of consciousness. I know that's a pipe dream and the AI bros are gonna school me in the comments section, but it's fun to think about. I've known about this stuff for 9-ish months now, and it has genuinely proven itself to be very useful. Like I said, there are plenty of arguments against this theory, chief among them, okay, so what, and we'll get to that, but I cannot help but think that this shit goes hard.
Question, what about, real science? And this stuff is cool and all, but you're talking about spirituality and consciousness, which are the antithesis of the scientific method. How do you reconcile the fact that there's no proof for any of this?
That's a good question, and I want to respect it by not beating around the bush. While I do think that someone far more research-minded could use my sorting system analogy to create a strong factual case for this stuff, ultimately this is a theory that doesn't think proof and facts are as important as the big metaphysical and poetic truths of the universe. If you fundamentally disagree with that ranking of importance, then you disagree with this theory, and we would be wasting our breath by going back and forth on it.
Question. Are you aware of Ken Wilber's associations with problematic figures? Most notably, he endorsed Adi Samraj, a guru later accused of severe misconduct, and continued to support him even after allegations surfaced. And I think I saw some video of him agreeing with Jordan Peterson. Wilber's professional credibility has also been challenged by the International Buddhist Ethics Committee, which found him guilty of academic dishonesty, spiritual manipulation, and violations of Buddhist precepts, labeling his work as pseudo-spirituality. And did you know he once confessed to hitting his late wife during a fight? I can see how this charismatic, tall white man could sell you on the idea of a cognitive hierarchy that he and his elect are conspicuously at the top of. But to me, it is incredibly obvious how something like this could be used to justify oppression or discriminatory practices. I get that we all support education, but that doesn't mean intelligence makes you better. That's such a problematic statement. All of this is very problematic. Honestly, I'm really disappointed in you.
So I could just point to the part of my sheet that diagnoses you with associative purity, but I want to unpack what that actually means since it's a thing I made up. Associative purity sounds like this. You are not permitted to associate with something which is problematic, and you may not associate with anyone who associates with that which is problematic. There should be no links between you and the cloud of oppression at the heart of our society. If you refuse to sever your connections to this cloud of oppression, you are contributing to the problem. If you befriend them, if you use any of their symbols or terminology, if you peddle ideas that have already been claimed by them, you are, at least in part, siding with the hierarchical culture that oppresses the communal culture, which is humans' natural state. I'll tackle those points in reverse order. Integral theory offers a very different way of thinking about the history of hierarchy and oppression. Recall the first thing I said in the video. People have not always been capable of all types of thoughts. Oppressed people themselves have not always been able to think about oppression in the way they can now. I mentioned how in a level 3 society like ancient Egypt, no one would have opposed slavery, and you might have been inclined to ask,
well, what about the enslaved people?
Which is a completely reasonable question. Here's how I would answer it. The part of you that wants to be free is a lower part of you, while the part of you that's actually capable of formulating an argument against the injustice and devising alternative systems, that takes a lot more intelligence. A person saying I'm hungry and stealing some bread is not the same as a person saying,
wow, the control of food in this society is a very oppressive system, and honestly, since this wheat was grown on stolen land, I see no reason as to why I can't steal it back.
You must understand that oppression does not inherently create egalitarian ideas. Those ideas only exist because the best and brightest of the green level 6 introduced them to the masses. Those highly educated people, and thus their ideas, did not exist for the majority of history. The vast majority of revolutions throughout history have not resulted in radical redistribution of resources, only in a transfer of power. Freedom is a pure idea that occurs spontaneously, but fairness is a nuanced idea that takes a long time to emerge in a population. This process involves fairness being defined and ironically enforced by a hierarchy. Your assessment of Wilber himself as problematic strikes me as deeply telling. And this is like just life stuff. The moment you realize that you are clearly inescapably in the wrong by your own standards is the moment your life changes forever. One facet of that change is you no longer choose friends based on their public moral scorecards, but on how you know them to be as people. Another facet of this change is that you begin to see yourself as being flawed. You might think that you're flawed now, but I'm guessing you'd phrase it like,
no one's perfect. I acknowledge where I sit within the interlocking systems of domination that comprise our society. I understand that I too am susceptible to propaganda, and I'm always working on my biases.
And that, in my opinion, is a cheap substitute for real inner work. While understanding one's capacity to be acted upon and deceived is essential to individuation, it is only the first step. You rightly recognize that your unwellness is logical in a profoundly sick world, but your lack of personal accountability prevents you from advancing the narrative in any way that doesn't cast you as a victim. In the words of Bill Hader, when people tell you what doesn't work, they're usually right. When they tell you how to fix it, they're usually wrong. If you knew what you were doing, you wouldn't have lost the culture wars. I challenge you to take a higher vantage point. Some remarks before I duck out of here. My first exposure to this theory was a video uploaded by an individual named Hobart Mathers.
Oh, you gotta be...
Mr. Mathers uses the levels to make what could be described as dating content. While the theory in this video largely takes a backseat to vindicating cultural gripes, it is still, I think, the most viewed piece of integral theory content on the entire internet. For a super niche philosophy, these are crazy numbers. I suspect that is precisely because he buried the story in derpy man-woman stuff. Oh, by the way, all of the nasty dating stereotypes that heterosexual men and women have about each other are all true, but only at this level. Go to clubs and talk to them. They're all over the place. They constantly lie and cheat on each other. It's hilarious. It's okay to make fun of these people because they don't watch video essays. Have you ever wondered why Drake fans constantly point to his Billboard status and streaming numbers as evidence that he's better than Kendrick Lamar, even though the battle was literally never about that? Well, it's because they're hitting a cognitive ceiling. They can't conceive of any form of success outside of more resources, higher numbers, more women, yay dance, I like to dance. So yeah, I realized that pretty much all the biggest topics in the collective psyche corresponded to this model, and I immediately got to work writing this video and reading Ken's books to supplement my own thoughts. But somewhere along the road, I got really burnt out. I realized that I had a viable theory of everything on my hands, and at the same time, a theory of nothing. Just like the Enneagram, integral theory wasn't a substitute for real creativity, and talking about it online certainly wasn't going to get me anywhere closer to my real creative goals. I realized that the reason Ken Wilber never did anything with this theory was because he spent his entire life writing about it. And thank God he did, right? But disseminating information is only half the battle. I think about this stuff maybe 5% of my day, max, and the other 95%, I just try to live in a way that integrates all that is around me, which I didn't even need the theory to do in the first place. I only picked this video back up and finished it because I needed to boost my consulting business to pay my bills and finance nefarious schemes. There might be some truth to the idea that integral theory, in its systematized form, is better suited as a writing tool than as a guiding principle for life or whatever, in which case, who better than me to package and sell it? Once again, check out lsnarrativeconsulting.com for the goods, and check out Unthink Me if you want to see an entire channel dedicated to integral theory. My favorite video is the one where Adam breaks down how each of the levels thinks about the sun. It's pretty kick-ass. My checklist and my world map and the spreadsheet where I cross-reference integral theory with the Enneagram are all available on my Patreon. Everything can be accessed via my link tree. Ken Wilber is a generational shooter, and if you want to get into his stuff, I would recommend A Post-Truth World because it builds off of topics that we, the chronically online, are already engrossed in. A Theory of Everything is solid and it's short, but keep in mind that he dives into boomer slander before he even lays out his theory. Sex Ecology Spirituality, it's like 800 pages, I'm told is Ken's magnum opus. I wouldn't know, I'm like a fifth of the way through it. It's huge. Again, the paradox of integral theory is that it won't apply to your day-to-day life. Instead, it will train you to think in a more holistic way, which will, in theory, lead to great returns in all of those areas of your life. But it's not a substitute for real passion and creativity. None of these systems are. Remember that. Go forth and have a swell day.